In making a Minecraft clone, we've done well so far to prototype, making use of Minecraft's textures to focus on the technical programming details. But we can't use these textures forever. Not only are we unable to redistribute them, but the game needs its own identity. So let us begin making an art style for this game. What makes a good art style? A good art style needs two things. 1. To complement the theme of a game, and 2. To be consistent. There are exceptions to this, such as when the art style purposely contrasts for the sake of irony, comedy, or shock value, but it holds for the general case. But what is the theme of our game? We don't have any game mechanics or lore to work with, so where do we begin? Let's start by looking at other block games and their art styles. Minecraft has what it seems to be a neutral, earthy color palette, with some noise to imply detail, which works well as there is a focus on exploring the natural world, and leaves much of the lore up for interpretation. Frigid Story has a more gritty art style, with an unsaturated palette, which puts emphasis on that is more of a tough survival experience. I think my game would do well to have a more saturated palette to help it stand out, and it may appeal to me personally a bit more. When making the art, I should keep in mind that I'll likely have some fantasy elements and lots of technology in the game, although nothing is set in stone yet. When it comes to noisy textures, it can be useful if the textures are low resolution, but I'll try to avoid it whenever possible, so that I can describe form better. I don't consider myself a texture artist, but starting here will help define the vision of the project, and if I need help in the future, it will set the direction for contributors to work towards. One of the most important blocks to start with is a grass block. Unless I plan to make barren wastelands, grass is the most common things you'll see, so let's start there. Because I am not a pixel artist, I don't have the intuition that comes with experience, so my first attempts were outright dreadful. However, since I had some practice under my belt, I was able to look at the results and see what went wrong with the textures, iteratively improving until getting somewhere I was satisfied with. I began with a low-spec 2000 palette, which, although the end result didn't include any of the colors from it, using a palette at the beginning can help focus on the actual form of the drawing, rather than the relation between colors. With GIMP, I made sure to take full advantage of the tiling symmetry mode, since the edges of the texture needed to be seamless with itself. I knew that dirt is structured in clumps, so my first attempt ended up with the dirt looking a lot like cobblestone as a result. With the grass, I drew lots of blades vertically upwards, with shadows casting at the base of them. After this, I thought I was satisfied until I saw the results in-game. Clearly, there were improvements to be made. The major glaring flaw was the dirt being too clumped up. Soil is usually fine and grainy, which is why Minecraft uses noise to represent dirt. But without resorting to that, I knew that clumps in the dirt had to be broken up. After all, dirt is not brown cobblestone. While breaking it up, I had to use my gut instinct to put the right distribution of shades, since the purpose of each individual pixel in low resolutions can be ambiguous. Although I wasn't finished with the dirt yet, it was time to take a look in-game, and I found that the grass was too aligned with the grid, so I needed to work on that next. I knew that the grass couldn't be grid-aligned, so I tried drawing blades from a top-down perspective, but the end result was just too cluttered. My next attempt was to have petal-like patterns, which, although looked much better than before, it still had that cluttered look. It was then I realized that grass blades are naturally quite small, and so would be suited to be represented as diagonal lines. That way it looks good from any direction, while still maintaining the detail needed for grass, and being simple enough as not to be messy when looking at multiple blocks at once. After settling on this technique, I knew that I now needed to do some color correction to polish the texture. The dirt texture in particular needed more muted colors, since the reddish hue I had before was very overbearing when looking at in-game. In addition, some more detail work was done to make the dirt more grainy, while still maintaining the form of the roots and back shadows. After all this, I made sure that the grass overhang on the dirt was given proper shadows, so that the depth would be represented properly. I was satisfied with the end result here, although the irony is I had set out to use saturated colors and to avoid noise. In the end, I had found it was better while unintentionally going against my initial assumptions. We still have plenty of textures to go, but this is a good start towards giving the game its own identity and defining its art style. As the devlog continues, I'll be making more textures until I no longer need to depend on Minecrafts while developing. I wasn't planning on making this video today, but I ran into several bugs while making the video on breaking blocks, and in addition I found out one of my algorithms were entirely wrong after promising a video for today. I would have had to fix bugs, change the script, and re-record with less time than I would have liked. As a result, I needed a simpler video for today, while still providing useful insight on game development. Now, let's look at the comments. You guys mentioned that an artist could use a program like Substance Designer to make procedural textures. Last time I said it would be concerning to rely on a texture artist for blocks due to potential copyright issues. And I ought to admit, thankfully, that I was wrong. It comes down to proof of work, such as procedural textures. Also, there are other things in the game that will require texturing, such as mobs that will undoubtedly prove an artist made original work, which means I could trust them to make blocks too. I don't see myself collaborating in the near future, at least until I know what license the game should have, but I'm glad that this opportunity has opened up. On open source tools. I've been thinking about this and debating whether to have the tools embedded in the game or as a separate application. If it were separate, it would mean that I could give it a very permissive license, such as MIT, and people would be able to reuse it for their own projects. Interestingly, I'd be able to publish any tools before the game itself, which could be a sneak peek into upcoming features. It would probably be basic tools at first, such as an editor for block properties. Rather than making a tool for block models and mobs, however, I'll likely use Blockbench, whether through a plugin or a fork of it. I asked about thoughts on crafting systems, and it turns out it was a much more complicated topic than I anticipated. Terraria had mixed opinions, being difficult to find items through a long list, but having the convenience of showing everything you can craft using the items you have now, and only needing to be nearby the relevant crafting stations. Tinker's Construct was praised for its modularity, and the Create mod for its automatable in-world crafting. Minecraft's 3x3 crafting was surprisingly with little criticism, mainly due to the recipe book making up for its faults. Next, I'd like to thank you all and your support in both your prayers and understanding. I won't go into detail on my circumstances, but I appreciate and am thankful to have you along. For next time, I'll finish up the video on placing and breaking blocks, along with a very important optimization that helps modifying the world with minimal delay. After that, you guys voted for player movement as the next feature, so look forward to that, especially with the inspiring suggestions you wrote. If you'd like to see that, stay tuned, take care, and I'll see you next time.